You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars and Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Jay Catch here. That is Parker Ainsworth from Locked On Cougs there. All right, Parker. So you said there's an energy guy that you are hoping, I guess, doesn't hurt Houston in this game. You didn't give me a name, so I am very curious which guy you are targeting here.
Well, I'm going to butcher it, which is part of the problem. But I've watched a game and a half as of the recording of this of BYU to get ready to get what I'm going to see happen on Saturday. Keita looks like a Houston Cougar in every way to me. Energy, long arms, a little undersized technically, but makes up for the high motor. He's a very traditional Houston Cougar center in that way. I liked watching him play. So Arizona State and part of the Ole Miss game thus far. What can you tell me about Keita? And please tell me he's not going to beat my Houston Cougars on Saturday. Don't tell me that part.
So it's Keita.
Oh, so I was wrong. Perfect. Gotcha.
But you were close. Here's the thing: you're not the only one that will guess it that way. He is a guy that BYU's been very aware of for years because he played his high school ball in Mount Pleasant, Utah, at a private school called Wasatch Academy. They play in the EYBL. They play in these elite private school leagues across the country. And he was a guy that BYU had targeted about coming to BYU. He ultimately went to Utah for a couple of years. But when Kevin Young hired Chris Burgess to join his staff from Utah, well, Keita was very quick to jump into the portal and follow Chris Burgess south to Provo. And yes, he is, I think Houston fans, they will get a look at him and say, yeah, this guy would fit totally with what Houston likes to do with their big man. Because you mentioned he's 6'8". He's built like a Greek god. He's chiseled out of
jacked. Dude, he's jacked.
Yeah. And he's got the athleticism to match that physicality. So he fits the bill of what you want. Yes, you'd like to have him be 4 inches taller and be a true 7-footer. Everybody would. But what he lacks in overall height, he makes up for in spades with his athleticism. The biggest thing for him right now, Parker, is his offensive inability to really stretch the floor. He is a true rim-rolling big man. So that's the thing about this is guys like Jaeger Demon, Dallin Hall, they'll have him come on ball screens, and if they can find him going to the rim, they'll lob it into him and let him do his thing. But he's not necessarily the biggest back-to-the-basket guy, nor is he a guy who can step out and hit a 15, 18, 20-foot jump shot. Your other big man, though, Fousseyni Traore, similar, undersized big man. He is more of that traditional back to the basket when you need a bucket, toss it in there, let him go to work. And I think Houston fans saw him last year. Foose played against Houston in that game, if I recall correctly. So they've got two different big men that BYU can throw at Houston. The biggest thing is, beyond those two, there's not a lot of depth. So foul trouble will absolutely be a critical thing in this game.
Well, and I don't mean to rain on your parade or spoil your turkey. I don't know which metaphor I'm going to go with there. But Jawan Roberts being a focal point of the offense was kind of a thing that Houston fell on last year. They hadn't really fallen to that this year. And then Oklahoma State, he turned around and got 20 points. And frankly, I argue they should have given the ball more. 20 points on 13 shots.
Wow. Okay, wow.
And he's the power forward. And so I don't know who covers him as a power forward. He's a very traditional, like 1990s, 2000s power forward. He's only 6'8", 6'9", right, himself. But I guess the Keita thing to me was he's the high rebound guy, and he's not like a guy like he's built like a Greek guy, like you said, but he's not a 7-footer that's a high rebound guy. He's high motor high rebound guy. So you mentioned low post depth. Do they ever go? I mean, with all these shooters and Demon running point, do they ever go to just spread it out and have no big men on the floor? I mean, they got the height to do it at other positions, I would imagine.
They tried that at multiple points earlier this season. Mihailo Boskovic, he is another addition that's new to the roster this year. He's a former EuroLeague youth star. They brought him in with the whole thought that he could be kind of that 5-out big man for them because he's legitimately 6'11", Parker, 6'10", 6'11". But the problem is he's kind of found himself as the odd man out in this rotation. It was too big of a rotation. They were playing 10, 11 guys, and Kevin Young has made it a point. He said, I've got to cut this down. And this past game, we didn't see Mihailo go into that game. So it feels like BYU is essentially going to go with a 4-out, 1-in. Just that's kind of I think, their identity this season. I think ideally in future iterations of this BYU basketball program, they will be able to play 5-out. And maybe at some point they find that option during this Big 12 season. But in this game, Parker, it doesn't feel like they'll be able to play that 5-out alignment because it would be something they would love to do to spread Houston out a little bit, to open up that lane. But I just don't see the ready-made option to allow them to truly play that style.
I'm never going to force them from Provo to gamble, but I will ask you a question here because on KenPom, they got Houston favored by 11 points.
Mm-hmm.
I would say as a home team, that's not actually that crazy a spread given the discrepancy in ratings and standings and things like that. I think that's fairly respectful of BYU, I guess I should say. And so what are you anticipating, predicting? What do you think of the 11-point KenPom analytical spread? And I imagine you think it's going to be closer than that at least, right?
Well, I would hope so. Here's the deal. Ken Pomeroy actually lives here in Utah. I've gotten to know him fairly well over the years, and I trust his ratings more than anybody else's out there. And that may be just personal bias because I know the guy and I like him a lot. I think 11 points is valid in this instance, Parker, because BYU, with the fact that they've had guys like Richie Saunders and Jaeger Demon miss time in the past month or so, they really haven't been able to really narrow in on what their set rotation is going to be. And the other thing is that rotation, it's been streaky with regards to its outside shooting. So with that combination of factors where the rotation may not be fully what they want it to be, because if this game were played maybe 2 or 3 weeks from now, I think you'd have a better idea of what the rotation was going to be and a better idea of what the overall shooting prowess of the squad was. But right now, with those question marks lingering over this team, I think 11 points is a valid number. But if BYU's shooting does show up on the road there in the Fertitta Center, BYU could make that a 4 or 5 point game easily, but I've got questions if they can find enough consistency in the outside shooting game to keep them in this one.
Well, and it's funny you say that because I worry about if this turns into a shootout. Again, on my Thursday episode, I talk about styles and fight and so on. Houston's offense is still missing that Jamal Shead guy from a year ago that just says, hey, I put everyone in the backpack and we're going forward with this kind of thing, right? They're kind of figuring out who that is. They've had moments where it's a different guy, but it hadn't been one guy for 40 minutes at any point this year. And I mean, Jamal Shead literally would play 40 minutes a game last year. And so if this gets into a thing where BYU's hot and it is high scoring, I worry about, can Houston keep up? Houston's defense is going to make it be somebody we haven't talked about yet that gets hot, right? That's part of the deal. It's going to be someone down the bench. I'm going to pull up a random name here. I don't know. Let me pull up the roster down the depth chart. It's going to be Boskovic. Sure. It'll be.
He's been out of the rotation, but there's no reason he couldn't do it because he has shown an ability to shoot from the outside and be that kind of that true stretch big man. So there is a chance that one of those guys, Dallin Hall, hasn't really gone off for a big game that I really consider to be a big game for him this year. That would be a big opportunity for him to do that. He was the guy last year when BYU went into Lawrence, Kansas and beat the Jayhawks. It was Dallin Hall's show down the stretch. He hit a big shot over Hunter Dickinson that it'll be played on BYU highlight reels for years to come because it was just right in your face, bullseye. And I was like, wow, okay, that kid's got some stones. So they need somebody to step up. And you mentioned the fact that Houston needs a Jamal Shead type player. BYU needs that same thing. It's kind of been by committee for BYU on that front with regards to who takes the scoring load on a given night. But in a game like this, when you're a decided underdog going to get against a team like Houston, you need like a Richie Saunders 30-point performance from Tuesday. If he could translate over to another 20-25 point performance down there in Houston, that would go a long way to helping BYU hopefully pull off an upset.
I think it's going to be a fun game and a good game, and Big 12 basketball is a big thing to me. I really love Big 12 basketball because the games are just physical and they're fun and they're close and competitive. We got to agree on one thing, though, before we get out of here.
Okay.
Y'all got them once. We got them twice. You mentioned you did it last year. Can we just all beat Kansas? Can we just all beat Kansas?
I'm totally okay with that. They're coming to Provo for the first time in quite some time later this season. And, yeah, I would love nothing more than to make the Jayhawks be even more upset than they were last year when BYU beat them on their home court.
Yeah, me too. We should all do that. All of us.
Make the Jayhawks unhappy. And I'm sure that Derek Johnson from Locked On Jayhawks is going to be very angry at both of us for saying that, but that's okay. Well, Parker, thanks so much for doing this. It's always good to catch up with our fellow hosts across the network. If BYU fans, that Thursday episode you talked about contrast and styles, if they want more on BYU and Houston lead up to this game, where can they find your work?
Well, I apologize. I found I've mispronounced like 3 names on it so far. But you can find me at Painsworth512 on all your social media handles and stuff like that. And then Locked On Cougs, much like Locked On Cougars, is everywhere you get your podcast. I think it's up on YouTube and all the audios. There was some people talking about audio issues, but I think mine have been out there on the audio side of things this week. So we're good there.
All right. Well, and if Houston fans, you want more of my thoughts on BYU, check out Locked On Cougars wherever you get your podcasts. It's on YouTube, as Parker mentioned. But if you want my thoughts on all things sports, you can check out our show feeds, Locked On Cougars on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, or you can check me out on X/Twitter at Jacob C. Hatch. Well, Parker, I'm sad this is the only matchup between these two this year. I was hoping we were going to get the double dip with Houston, but hopefully maybe we see you guys in March or something like that. All right.
Yeah, that's a Big 12 tourney time at least, right? It'll be fun. That'll be fun.
It would be a lot of fun. Well, thanks again for doing this, my man. And I'll be sure both of us will have postcast editions, I'm sure, shortly after this game goes final tomorrow afternoon. We'll have a full reaction come up in the weeks ahead. But Parker, thanks as always, my man. Hope all is well with you, and a happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to go Cougs. We can all say that part, right? Go Cougs. We all say that.
Go Cougs. Yeah, we all say that. Come on, we all say that. All right. Well, thanks again for making Locked On Cougs and Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you for being with us. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougs and Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And more importantly, thank you for being everydayers with us right here on the Locked On Cougs and the Locked On Cougars podcast.